Hi, this is Paul. I was going to be done for today, but I just kept playing around with my Mark Parker conversation because I thought there's more in that. Part of the difficulty of dropping a 2-hour conversation with a rando on the internet or someone who's not terribly known is that most people just don't watch it because we the deep TLC folks will, but a lot of other people won't. And I've had a number of people that often say, well, your clips are helpful because they help me know where there might be more things that I want to see and need. So I'm going to drop a part of the conversation in here that I had between Mark Parker and myself about Trump and the times that we have where things are scrambled. So I'll drop that here.
These things. What I'm saying is rather than debate the particulars, which we could go on and on and on about, what I'm saying is what we're talking about is the sacred. This is what I got from your content in the last couple of days. This idea that our icons are are being attacked, and that's probably what is motivating the Trump derangement syndrome, so called, in Democrats and liberals.
I think the Trump derangement syndrome is much more associated with the I think you're right in that Trump is an iconoclast, but I think a lot of the iconoclasm he has been rupturing has been a certain facade of respectability and waspy Protestant restraint. So, for example, people are talking about Donald Trump's sexual ethic. If you look at John F. Kennedy's sexual ethic, I mean, just absolutely abysmal.
Mhm.
But the the sort of the waspy keeping up appearances meant that reporters protected JFK's sexual secrets in the same way they protected Roosevelt's
Right.
wheelchair.
Hmm.
And so part of what happens in the 60s is, again, I think the counterculture is an iconoclastic tradition that says, no more, no more, no more will we protect JFK's sex life. It's all going to be out in the open. In fact, we're going to have everything out in the open at Woodstock. I mean, I was, and this is where the narratives get interesting because when I heard, I don't remember if it was Jordan Peterson or if it was Brett Weinstein or it was somebody else who basically said that this little event that they did on September 29 in Washington, D.C., was going to be the Woodstock for their generation. For
Yeah.
me, it was like strange. It's like, no, Woodstock was I mean, because the iconoclastic solvent of the counterculture intended to rip away the facade that was hiding corruption. And what they weren't prepared for was that if you rip apart facades, you'll see a lot of ugliness, whether it's hiding corruption or not. And so, in that sense, Donald Trump is a child of the counterculture
Mm.
in that there was no facade on him. You know, he, he wanted to sleep with porn stars.
Hmm.
He would cheat on his wife and he would sort of and so in that way Trump is a really interesting figure because on one hand he's sort of a child of the 60s and says I'm going to dispose of the facade,
Right.
no more of the air of respectability that covered up Marilyn Monroe sneaking into the White House
Hmm.
or covered up FDR's wheelchair.
Hmm.
No more of that. I'm going to I'm going to say what's on my mind about whatever I think and I'm so beloved someone I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they wouldn't arrest me. So there's that. But yeah, part of, but then there's also the layer where he and Bill Clinton as draft dodgers is also there,
Mm-hmm.
because the whole draft dodging thing was an element to rip away the facade and say, in a sense, no more kayfabe. We're going to really hit each other in this movie. But the levels of kayfabe kept developing. So therefore, unlike John McCain, these guys, Bill Clinton goes to Canada to avoid the draft,
Mm-hmm.
and Donald Trump has daddy's money to avoid the draft. And John McCain goes to Vietnam and gets captured. And John McCain is a senator's son. Remember the songs.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't no senator's son. He is a senator's son,
Mm-hmm.
and he still goes. And so what I see us doing as a nation is basically continue to process these images, icons, and narratives. And this is where it gets super confusing,
And the
because
guy who's the senator's son, well, and this is his, he was the admiral, and he was the admiral's son who
that's
was in
right.
command of the fleet
That's right.
making war on Vietnam.
That's right. That's right.
And but McCain's now the bad guy
Right.
in this whole narrative.
Right. Well,
I
and
mean,
and
it took. I mean, the lefties who had nothing good to say about John McCain 20 years ago.
right.
They're weakly holding him up as a standard, as a hero, only because he was attacked by Trump and Trumpism.
Right.
Uh,
And that's
Sorry.
where it's almost impossible to follow the narratives,
Yeah, it is. It's too much.
because I'm gonna I pulled out on Twitter this morning. I once again pulled out. I'll put it up on the screen. I think this is Jonathan Peugeot's best tweet. Um, I'll share the screen. If you want to build a civilization, you cannot do so on words like dark, rebel, and heterodox. By using these identifiers, you can criticize existing systems effectively, but you will never build anything of value and coherence. So, part of what we're struggling with are foundations. And when we look at John McCain and the sacrifices he made for the country, there's something foundational in that for us. But part of what the counterculture in the 1960s did to undermine that was say, and this didn't happen until after America was sort of shamed by the way America shamed Vietnam vets,
Mm-hmm.
was to say, regardless of, John McCain was still a good soldier. And it is honorable to be a good soldier even for a bad cause.
Mm-hmm.
So we sort of made that move in America in the late 70s, early 80s. But of course, when Ronald Reagan comes in, you sort of have a recycling, because then you have a new conservatism coming in with Reagan. But again, Reagan was Reagan the first divorced president of the United States?
Mm-hmm. I think
So
it was.
so there was a degree of kayfabe with Reagan as well. And
Mm-hmm.
of course Reagan was an actor. And so, I mean, part of what's so difficult in our age, and the internet just accelerates this, is people are longing for the foundations, the truth, which I think is part of the reason why there's, you know, tremendous interest in orthodoxy. And if you're going to be a Catholic, be a trad Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
because people are hungering for old things, because they want out of the swirling They want out of the swirling inversion after inversion after inversion after inversion. And they're seeking the sacred as foundation. And there is something to the fact. I mean, what fueled Jordan Peterson's status rocket was the manliness of him saying, the government of Canada cannot compel my speech. And if they take me to prison, I won't eat their food. I'll have a hunger strike. I mean, but it's in the same way, the same sort of authenticity that, again, remember during the Vietnam War. Now, you and I were too young to
Mhm.
really remember that clearly, but we remember it
Our
vaguely.
memories of it were maybe the escape out of Saigon. That's
Right.
probably, yeah.
Right. But remember early on in the Vietnam War, the self-immolation of that Buddhist monk, the
Hmm.
picture of that Buddhist monk lighting himself on fire. And so in this postmodern era that says there's no such thing as a foundation, we suddenly, meta modernity arises because we realize we must have foundations. And so then suddenly authenticity and profilicity and sincerity all sort of go into a swirl where, well, due to lack of foundations, John McCain showed us something. And um, Jordan Peterson showed us
Mm.
something. And
Yeah.
then the question is, of course, with Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, can we trust them? Do they have skin in the game? Then this morning on Claire's live stream, she had a really nice section in there with Ron where they were talking about yet another. I've been hearing these stories a lot with the sort of the Trump people who suffer from Trump derangement syndrome freaked out again when he won. And and now they're doing all sorts of damage to relationships. And it was super interesting listening to Clara say, well, I actually think that's kind of what you guys are doing with these conversations, is that you are figuring out how not to freak out. You're figuring out how to have conversations across differences, not perfectly, of course, but you're figuring out how to hold each other in relationships when you have Trump voters and Harris voters, and you're actually being able to maintain a community across this divide that is not holding even some families together. And then Mark S., who's a friend of Chad, he came into the corner via real life relationship with Chad, and I thought what he said when he jumped in was very helpful. And because of the way YouTube deals with live streams and the ability to sort of down them and chop them up, I sort of have to play it this way.
Probably would agree with you, but I want to understand.
Mark S is here. Should we see what he's got to say too?
Dude, oh, Mark.
Hey, Mark. I don't know if we've met before.
Hello. Yeah, just not from outside the comments. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to jump in for a second. I don't have much to say. I just wanted to jump in for the heck of it. But, it just kind of occurred to me, being on the internet, having to be a contrarian like everybody. There's so much talk about, like, we need to hear different points of views. We need to hear different perspectives and try to understand the other and all these things, which, okay, it sounds really nice, but maybe not. Maybe that's what's wrong with everything, is that we have access to different points of view. Maybe we're not supposed to have different points of view. Maybe we're all supposed to believe the same thing, and that's the natural way we're supposed to be. Like in the old times, people want to go back to when things were tranquil and more community-based. Well, communities believed the same thing. They had the same religion, they had the same mythology, and they had it's like there wasn't all this individualistic choice of being doing what suits you. You had one choice. I don't know. I just maybe that's the problem, is we have too much access to other points of views. because I know it drives me a little schizophrenic sometimes.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay. No.
I mean,
That's
I don't know if I believe. I don't necessarily believe that. I'm just throwing it out there. You know, like I'm just kind of. I don't know. It just kind of hit me like we're taught to be open-minded so much. Like maybe we shouldn't be. Maybe because people who are very staunch in their views and very like fundamentalistic, a lot of the time they do really well in life.
And I thought what he said there was so helpful because you need an integrated whole. You need a container. This gets into this piece. Now, this podcast that I'm going to play is the one where I got this quote that I used today from Fareed Zakaria. Tony Blair said to me, when people feel deeply insecure, they don't move left economically, they move right culturally. And I think that's very much what Mark S. is talking about. And Zakaria begins this. He will talk about authenticity later, about why the Democrats... Dave Pachman just did an interview where he said, it was super interesting because he said, I can't get Democrats to come on my podcast. And what's so funny is that Jordan Peterson has been saying the same thing. And we sort of attributed the fact that Jordan Peterson couldn't get Democrats to come on his podcast to the fact that they thought that they would sort of be tainted by this blue church hit job that was done on Jordan Peterson. But it seems they can't even go on their own. They won't even go on their own podcast. And so later, Fareed Zakaria talks about, again, this is something that's well known, how people are looking for authenticity. People are looking for authenticity. Mark S. is basically saying we're hungering for sincerity. And part of the reason we're hungering for sincerity, I gotta pull that. Part of the reason we're hungering for sincerity is because we're hungering for roots and foundations. And we've got this swirl going on where there's so much commonality between, let's say, Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. And of course, Donald Trump beat Bill Clinton's wife in the 2016 race. And I mean, it's so oligarchical too. And so in many ways, we've had all this pushback against the boomers, and yet a boomer won the president again, an old boomer. And I mean, there's just so much confusion going on. And so just the beginning of what Zakaria said in terms of, I don't know if I'm going to play it because I don't know if these guys are going to, give me grief because I use some of it. But basically what he said, he just wrote a book about revolutions. He says, what's really going on now is a revolt against openness because people are just too swamped. And then Algo served up for me this new Sam Harris thing that's on Think Big, where Sam Harris is, you know exactly what Sam Harris is going to say, but he's saying, I'm for openness, I'm for open borders and open institutions, and we need these institutions in order to make sense and keep control. And so even this sense of openness and control is just super scrambled. I mean, everything is just scrambled. And again, in an age of scramble, people sort of bend towards nostalgia, and they don't go left economically. Of course, that's what Joseph Stalin was imagining. Joseph Stalin was thinking, I'll throw enough chaos, put enough pain into the system, and people will go left economically, and they'll hunger for communism. And actually, what they hunger for is that they go right culturally. They go back to their roots. They try to find at least some sure spot, some stable place, and they do that communally, and they do that emotionally, and I think it just makes a world of sense. And then this bit from Paul Kingsnorth, he wrote a piece called Donald and the Pincer. If we are living through a revolution, it's not the rise of cultural Marxism, but the ongoing accelerating revolution of the machine. The postmodern left, which has seized the heights of so much Western culture, is not some radical threat to the establishment. It is the establishment. Progressive leftism is market liberalism by other means. It enables the spread and growth of machine society by launching an all-out war with any cultural norms that remained for us in the 2020s, norms which act as a brake on the spread of machine values. In other words, even the revolution that's underway now, let's say the political revolution, everyone's thrown out. Fareed Zakaria notes that all the major countries that have had elections this year have thrown out their incumbents because they want something new. And so again, you have this weird thing where people sort of, I want security, I want nostalgia, but I want something new. And it's so disorganized and what it actually feeds is in some ways the machine. I mean, again, Dave Pachman says Democrats don't come to the podcast. Well, they're going to come to the podcast now that Trump won, and so the pace is going to increase. The left and corporate capitalism now function like a pincer. One attacks the culture, deconstructing everything from history to heteronormity to national identities. The other moves to monetize the resulting fragments. Where then to stand? Could there be a left without progress? Could there be a right without capitalism? Or is it all just noise? All of the political categories we tear each other apart over are products of the machine age. None of them have altered the course of the world in which technology is the driver of all change. The machine absorbs, it's sort of like battles on YouTube. You know, these channels are going back and forth, and Dave Pachman talks about how he lost subscribers. But you know who wins? YouTube wins. It doesn't matter who wins the campaign. YouTube wins. It doesn't matter which channels grow or fall. YouTube wins. The house always wins, and the machine is the house. The machine absorbs all challenges to its ascendancy. Liberals want to direct history's arc. Conservatives want to stand athwart history yelling, "Stop!" And leftists want to break history altogether and start again. But history rolls on regardless. The machine's metaphysics are independent of all of our struggles and notions. The machine-fueled culture of inversion changes all of our parameters. This is a time in which the pertinent questions are not who should own the means of production or should we privatize the health system. They are what is a woman? Where should we implant the microchips? How quickly can we get this digital AI system up and running? And what do you think of my new killer robot? The creation of designer babies, the abolition of sexed bodies, the growing of brains in labs. Neither side of the French Assembly has a clue what to do with any of it. Whatever you want, the machine can provide. Technology can fashion it, and progressive ideology can redefine it as justice. I thought that was pretty potent. So yeah, I had to make another video. I didn't clip the other videos, but I'll put the links to the other videos below, and let me know what you think.